Hello there, and welcome to the ClueCon weekly studio. We're here with another podcast, and I'm very happy to have Alex Quilici with us. How are you doing, Alex? All right?
Good, very good, and you said it perfectly.
Oh, thank you very much. You told me to say it with my hands, and I tried to get them on the screen, but not properly. It's very good to have you along, Alex. And as I already said when we were just having a brief chat before the recording, I'm a bit envious of your backdrop there. It looks very, very nice where you are. Where are you dropping into the studio from today?
So I'm in Malibu, California.
Lovely.
And it is nice, a nice day today.
Excellent. That's great. Well, thank you very much for dropping into the ClueCon weekly podcast studio. We're happy to have you here. And I'd like to start by getting a little bit of a background from you, please, Alex, because you're not our sort of traditional guest in terms of kind of being a developer of communications software per se, although of course you so I wonder if you could start off by giving us a bit of a background of you, leading us up to where you are now.
So I'd like to say I'm a developer of communication companies. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. My first company was way back before smartphones, so in 1999, 2000. And we were basically Siri over a 1-800 number. So you could call a 1-800 number and our software would answer, let you use speech recognition to say, how much is this specialized mountain bike? What's the weather like nearby? Where's the nearest Chinese restaurant? So very, very early primitive version of Siri. We ended up selling that to AOL.
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question on that?
Sure.
Of course, back in those days, speech recognition technology was not as advanced as it is now. And of course, it was really the days of like directed dialogue. So, for instance, if it was a company directory, it would probably narrow it down to sales first. And once you're into sales, it would say, now say the first name and the last name of the person. So how on earth could you deal with those lots of different things in those early days?
So we actually built the grammars dynamically on the fly. But we did have people classifying for us, like I'm interested in a restaurant. So we asked them questions, directed the dialogue, and then opened it up a bit later on when it was narrower. You know, the vision and the execution often are two different things. Our vision was the full say whatever Siri vision. The result was the directed dialogue with some open pieces in it. But for the time, it was actually a really interesting system to build. It got us to the attention of AOL. We actually got bought and became AOL Voice Services. We did a number of interesting things, but we basically gave voice access to AOL email way back in the day. We had voice access to a number of other AOL properties. So it's kind of fun to actually start from a little vision and end up with an audience of over 1 million people paying us every month. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. And just for us technology geeks out there, what technology did you build that on? Was it back in the days of telephony cards?
It was Dialogic cards. It was, I think, SpeechWorks back at the time. We built, was sitting in an Exodus hosting center originally before it moved somewhere else. And a lot of it was stuff we had to build by hand. Like, there was nothing that could take an internet website, find all the data on it, build a grammar dynamically to have access to that. We were really proud of what we were able to do.
Great stuff. Great stuff. And what happened next?
So I stayed with AOL for a while. We actually built this AOL by phone, AOL voicemail service, and wanted to build other stuff. We released something called AIM Phone Line, which was actually a lot like Google Voice, free phone numbers tied into AIM. And then eventually it just wasn't the priority there. So I left. I wanted to take some time off, but stumbled into this company called YouMail that was just getting off the ground. And so I wound up being an investor in it. It had this vision of, let's do better voicemail for carriers, multiple greetings. So everybody gets a different greeting. Take your cell phone voicemail and make it in the cloud, which wasn't even called the cloud back then, right? And put it in the cloud and let people access their messages wherever and whenever they want, whether it's on the website or through the phone or at the fledgling smartphones like BlackBerrys back then. And I've been doing that ever since. The company's just morphed. It used to be better voicemail. Now it's about call protection. And we've become a security company. How do we make sure the bad guys don't ring your phone, they don't leave you messages, or you don't accidentally call a bad guy?
Right. So when you were building that up, I know from our previous discussion that you've got FreeSwitch as one of the core platforms in there. How did you come across FreeSwitch and kind of get involved?
So at the really high level, we originally built it with something called HP Open Call. We made the mistake back then of saying if we want to scale like our vision is, we're going to need something with proven scaling capabilities, and all of the bells and whistles. After about 3 years, we realized we were spending a boatload of money on that and really weren't getting what we wanted compared to FreeSwitch. And everybody's talking about, why are you guys on FreeSwitch? And we evaluated it, and our CTO and the team said, let's bite the bullet. We ported everything over. And it's been great ever since, right? Open source, low or no cost. It's been a huge win for us.
Great. And give us some numbers around it, like, the numbers of callers you're handling concurrently or over a day or whatever that might be.
So we've done well over 10 billion ever on FreeSwitch since we shifted over. We're doing into the hundreds of millions a month of calls that we're answering for people. So we replace their mobile voicemail, which means we're answering all of these missed calls every day. And that's a pretty stunning amount. When you think about doing 3, 4, 5, 10 million calls every single day, that's a lot.
Yeah, that's absolutely massive. And what would you say that the concurrent load is at any one time? What's your kind of peak number of concurrent calls?
I know it's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 calls kind of simultaneously all the time, all day long. Sometimes peaks above that. Sometimes, Sunday at 2 a.m. Maybe it's a little bit lower, but it's in that ballpark.
Right. So you must have some reasonably serious infrastructure to host all of that on.
We do. We actually did it ourselves. So we're in a hosting center versus putting it all on AWS. We actually like having the control over it, especially with the amount of processing we do with all these calls and all the data that we acquire and need to use to block calls. So it's been great for us to have, the Camelios and the Camelios, I never know how to say it, the FreeSwitches and all that stuff under our control and our servers. So it's sort of a private cloud model.
Oh, that's great news. And just for people, for the purists out there, the correct pronunciation, I believe, is Cameraio. It's
I never would have got that. Maybe I have to use my hands. Cameraio.
It's a Hawaiian word meaning conversation, I believe. Great project as well. We're very friendly with the Cameraio team. Great stuff. And I had another question, and that is, so what are the mechanics? You say that you're answering people's calls. Do they have to divert their mobile phones to you, or how do you become their voicemail service?
So exactly, they do the diversion things, call forward busy, call forward no answer on their mobile phones, dial the little GSM code or the CDMA code, and then we replace their carrier voicemail. So any call they don't answer winds up hitting our platform. And so that's just nonstop, because especially if we're blocking calls, then they don't even hear the ringer, it goes directly to our platform. And so we're essentially the replacement for carrier voicemail and carrier call blocking all wrapped up into one.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So what effectively started as a straight voicemail service, you've kind of built out other offerings within that world.
Yeah, and the story behind that's actually really interesting. When YouMail was founded, there was a feature called Ditch Mail, which basically played an out-of-service message to a specific number. The idea was, the hookup gone bad, or there's a stalker, they're calling you all the time. You can fool them into thinking your phone number is not working anymore and make them go away. So we did that little feature designed for that use case. And then in about 2014, 2015, we're looking at how people were using the feature, and it was all toll-free numbers, or everybody's using it to block the same number. We went, people are using this to block robocalls. It's gone far beyond the initial use case to a much more interesting one. And then being technology people, we said, well, how can we do it for them? They shouldn't have to go build block lists. It's silly. Let's go build a block list. And we've just worked on that ever since.
Right. So rather than people having to build a personal block list, which I'm guessing they still can, because they may still have that situation where they've got a nuisance call from an individual rather than a corporation. But from the corporate point of view, from the robocaller point of view, you're building up a central repository of bad numbers.
Exactly. And it's even more than that. It's not just robocalls. There's a lot of scam calls that happen with individuals calling, especially at the local level. The guy pretending to be your bank or pretending to be your pharmacy. And we want to block those too. So for us, it's about blocking unwanted calls, whether or not it's automatically dialed. It's about, is this likely to be spam and unwanted? Is this likely to be a scam? let's try to not let those calls through as much as we can.
Right. Okay. I'd like to come back and talk more about that before, but before we do that, you've got a massive free switch implementation. Can you talk a little bit about any growing pains you had, or any particular approach you had to take to make sure you could actually scale up that big?
So from my perspective, it's been relatively minimal growing pains once we migrated over and everybody understood the new system and was building to the new system instead of the old one. I think if you talk to my CTO or the developers in the operational side, I think there was a pretty good sized learning curve for them just to understand how everything works and where the limitations are and how it integrates with other services. But by and large, it's been pretty smooth. I think once they got to the first 500,000 users, getting to 10 million users isn't a big deal. It's 10 to 100 to 1 million. That's where you have all the growing pains, and it's true of any service, any platform.
Right, and when you decided to make that move and to adopt Open Free Switch, was there any resistance inside the company? Did people have to be dragged into that a little bit, or was there open arms? Or maybe it was a choice that was originally made internally by some of your engineers finding Free Switch?
It was the CTO and the engineers saying, we don't want to spend all this money on licenses for stuff that we don't like and has too many limitations. We don't necessarily understand how it's working. And here's something that's exactly the opposite of that. It looks like it's free, so it's going to save us a bunch of money. It looks like it's well featured, has a lot of functionality. Looks like it has other people using it who are happy. Seemed to be a relatively easy and straightforward decision for engineering, even knowing it's going to take you 3-6 months or whatever to port everything you had on the old system to the new one.
Oh, great stuff. Okay. Well, thank you for bringing us along to the story so far. And you've said you've had to, or you've come to the point of assembling this list of bad numbers. How do you go about doing that? How do you actually build a list like that?
So we have what we call Shazam for spam. We've basically built a giant database of audio that indicates a problem. The fake IRS scammer, the fake Social Security Administration scammer, the guy pretending to be Chase Bank. We have all that audio. Well, when a new number comes in and leaves a message, we can take that message and that audio and compare it to our database and go, aha, this number just did IRS scam number 17. Let's start blocking this number. And we actually start knowing a lot about these campaigns. Like an IRS scammer will flip the number once a day, so you don't really need to block it for very long. It's only going to be a problem for 24 hours. And so we basically built up this huge database with that information, and then can look at what we understand from every new call that comes in. So you can think of YouMail as a giant sensor network. All our users are the sensors collecting data that we can then use AI and other techniques to match against interesting data we've collected in the past that we know is problematic.
That's you hit on the term that I was going to use in my next question, the AI side. What kind of technology are you using to make those comparisons?
Well, so there's some basic machine learning and clustering algorithms where you look at a lot of stuff that comes in that seems to be the same, and you try to cluster the ones that are bad as opposed to the ones that are good, because your bank can call you for a real reason and a scammer can call you for a fake reason. And so how do you separate those out? There's a lot of matching. The matching, I just kind of flippantly say, oh, well, we match it against this database of, billions of messages that are tagged with bad or good and what they do. That's a non-trivial problem from an AI perspective to recognize the distance between some new audio you got and audio that's sitting there in a database and understand what the closest match is. So there's some pretty significant technology in here. I think we have 8 patents on some of it now. So we're pretty proud of what we were able to do using just some basic AI stuff. Better matching, better clustering, better lookups, those kind of things.
That's great. So you've actually, created this technology yourselves. And in terms of the audio matching, actually analyzing side-by-side audio, are you using any sort of commercial packages or services for that specific part?
No, we've done it all ourselves. I mean, one of the nice things is you can actually transcribe messages now and transcribe audio and get pretty far with transcriptions. It's not good enough because you could have computer speech and a person, one's a scam, one's not, where all the words are the same. But it gets you a pretty good pretty good mileage moving forward to be able to just compare transcriptions of one kind or another. You think what Gmail does, but do it for audio that's been transcribed.
Okay, yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, it's sounding great. And you explained that you started off just being effectively a voicemail replacement service. How has what you've got now kind of transformed your go-to market offering, if you like?
Well, we've pitched it based on security now. Do you want to protect yourself, right? Protect yourself from unwanted calls, scam calls, unwanted voicemails. And what's nice is once somebody starts getting some of those calls, they start looking for a solution, and we're a natural solution for them. And so that's really how we've transformed that part of the company. The other interesting thing is we've gone beyond voicemail, where we actually have a second line phone service. So you can actually get phone numbers from us. It's got a smart virtual receptionist that's much more powerful than voicemail. It protects that number from getting robocalls. And so we've built that way too. So we've actually said, look, we can protect your cell, our basic service, or we can give you other phone numbers that are protected as well that you can use for your business. And you can't be productive if you're not protected. And that's been very valuable for us.
Great message. Yeah. And you talked about protecting people's cell phones. I know that occasionally, I know this isn't big right now, or maybe you'll have more information. You can tell me whether it is, but there's the concept of the telephony denial of service, when people have a number that's bombarded with a lot of calls, maybe maliciously, to stop, real customers getting through to you, in order that they find somebody else. Does your service also cover that telephony denial of service vector, if you like?
It does it sort of not necessarily by design, but just by happenstance. Because if somebody is starting to barrage your number with calls, if your ringer is off because these calls look suspicious, you're not having to deal with them, and then we're filtering any messages they leave, leaving you only the stuff that actually matters. So it may be the case where your ringer is off, and so you're not answering calls directly, but we can filter stuff fairly automatically, so you just have the stuff that matters, who left you a message that you can then call. So it's not a perfect solution, but it is helpful.
Yeah, and as you said, when people start suffering one of these attacks or another, they're going to be Googling on protecting things, and I guess that's where you're coming up. Another question in this whole realm of robocallers: where does stroke shaken fit into your world?
So I think the idea of stir shaken is to really solve one particular problem, which is the spoof number problem. When you're making a call and you just plug in whatever caller ID you want, that has good uses. You're a call center, you want a single number, not every single line's number. But the bad guys have realized, hey, I can do all sorts of stuff. I can plug in a number that looks like yours. I can plug in a number that looks like Apple's main support number. I can do what I want. So stir shaken is designed to stop that problem, because if you're not authenticated when a call hits you, if there's no authentication for it, you can say, well, this is definitely not necessarily safe. It may be safe. It may be bad, but you can indicate that. And so the idea is it makes it harder for bad guys to just spoof numbers and get through. The way I view it is it's not a silver bullet. It'll help. Anything that adds a speed bump to what the bad guys are doing is great, but it's not a wall where they just turn around and give up. And so what's going to happen with the bad guys, and we're already seeing it, is they go get 100,000 numbers or 200,000 numbers that are all legit, that will ultimately look good on stir shaken. And they make the call and suddenly it looks like, hey, this is a real number. Maybe this really is the IRS. And so there are things that stir shaken does that will help, try to find those too. But it's clear the bad guys are going to just snowshoe calls through huge numbers of numbers and cause trouble that way and try to fly below the radar. Right.
Okay. Just in terms of the way communications is going, of course, people are, to a greater or lesser extent, either supplementing their traditional telephony or maybe entirely replacing their traditional telephony calls with omni-channel stuff, the WhatsApp call, the Messenger call, and so on and so forth, and just, regular web RTC through websites and things. Do you see your solution expanding to, protect the person from those channels as well?
We do, and the vision has always been to protect communications. I mean, we're focused on calls, but what we do can apply to text messages very easily. It can apply to calls that are made inside a network, We can recognize that there's a bad guy in, say, a WhatsApp network making the call, or it's a scam call. So we can apply it elsewhere. The interesting thing is the calling market is still massive, right? Like a lot of people said the phone call's gone away. Yeah, except for the 4 trillion or so that are made every month, or whatever the large number is. So I think we've got a pretty good place to start, and then we can, expand from there and do other things.
Yeah, from what you've described, it's the intelligence in the system, not necessarily the communication channel that's doing all of the work. That's great. Okay, now I understand that you've found a mechanism to try and make some of this available to FreeSwitch users.
That's right. So the blacklist that we use dynamically in our apps and that we use to block calls has been something that we've been trying to work on getting distributed more widely. So we have a carrier, Republic Wireless, that uses our block list at the network level to stop calls from hitting them. And so we decided, hey, it looks like it's valuable for us to put our block list as something people can use in general if they're building a PBX or they've got some particular application. So we've built a FreeSwitch mod. We haven't released it yet, but it's basically a way to go and see if a particular phone number is bad as you're going through the call path and deciding what to do with the call. Do I want to hang up on it? Do I want to route it to voicemail? Do I want to let it through? So our goal is that to have something commercially available to FreeSwitch developers that can dramatically improve things over a by hand maintained blacklist, which I believe is the current mod, is one you have specific numbers that go in. We think you can't do that. You have to. There's a million bad numbers. Somebody's got to manage it in an automated, algorithmic fashion.
Right. Okay. And if FreeSwitch users watching this would like to get in contact or to find out more, is there a website they can go to or somewhere they can register to find out for when you do have that module available?
So I'm going to regret this, but they can just email alex@youmail.com and say they're interested, and I'll make sure they get sent to the right place. So we're happy to build up that list. The catch will be they've got to tell me what they want to use it for, so I understand the use cases and the applications. But we're happy to take that list, and so we have people we can notify once it's live. Great.
Okay. And your email address is boldly displayed in your little name banner down there in the lower third, as we sometimes call it. So people will be able to
feel free to email me. It's fine.
Go ahead with that. Well, Alex, we're coming towards the end of our time together. Thank you very much for joining me. But I always ask, well, I say always, not always ask, but I sometimes ask at the end of a little chat like this, is there anything else you'd like to say before we close down?
No, I guess I could be remiss if I didn't tell people, if you want to learn more about how YouMail blocks calls, go to our website and check it out. I think we've done some pretty interesting stuff. And our API is available now, but it'll be better for FreeSwitch users when it's a mod.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you for telling us about the service as well. Fascinating stuff, the use of AI and the Shazam for spam. That's a good one to remember, isn't it? Who came up with that in the organization?
Oddly, it was a Washington Post reporter. He did an article where he compared a bunch of different robocall blocking services. And the way he described ours was we're Shazam for spam. And he really liked how we could detect stuff quicker than some of the others. So that stuck. We thought it was great. So you can thank Jeff Fowler, I believe it was, at the Washington Post.
Right, that's brilliant. Okay, well, look, thank you very much for dropping by, Alex. Great to have you along, and great to hear about your mass usage of FreeSwitch as well. And for now, we'll say bye-bye, and thank you again for coming in.
All right, thank you. I really enjoyed being on here.